with another fantastic conversation. This is the show where we have one guest expert join us each week to talk about a wide range of issues affecting the the performance artistic community, actually, from racism, gender and equity, sex abuse prevention, psychology, nutrition, and of course, science and medicine. I am Bree Zabrowski, the co founder and CEO of Apollo Performance, here with my fabulous friend and co host, Melissa McDaniel Grisham of Turning Point Dance Creations. Melissa, always a pleasure to see you. How's your Friday?
It is going well. It's actually sunny here, so I am happy and not freezing cold.
Yay! That's a good sign, right? We're almost done with the snow.
Right.
But today, Melissa, we're talking about boundaries. This is a big one. We've never
Yep.
even touched this topic before on the show. Talking about boundaries, what are they? How do we set them? How can they help us mentally and physically and minimize that all too familiar burnout that we all feel from time to time,
Mhm.
right? So we're
Yep.
honored to help us with this conversation. We're honored to welcome back our friend, Ashley Mowry, to walk us through it all. And Melissa, for those that haven't met Ashley yet, tell us a little bit more about her.
Yes, we are so happy to have Ashley. She has been a repeat guest season one, season two, and now back season three, and back season three for a series. So you'll see Ashley two more times in this season for a series of shows. So I'm going to tell you about her now. Ashley is a former competitive dancer, dance educator, and competition company director, and now a mindset coach. She helps dancers build a healthy mindset so they can shine on and off stage. Ashley works with dancers through one on one virtual coaching as well as studio and team workshops. She's also with the Embodied Dance Conference, where she is super busy now. So you can see her all over the place, where she does mindset skills seminars. She holds a BA in psychology from the University of Arkansas with an associated certified coaching through the International Coaching Federation, and a whole person certified coach and trauma informed certified coach. She has so many certifications. I can't even name them all. But she's also a specialist for Doctors for Dancers, and she contributes to the blog for our very own Apollo Performance. So thank you so much, Ashley, for being here. We are just excited to have you for the first of three shows for this season.
Yeah, thank you all so much. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, and Ashley's touring with Embody Dance Conference. So if you haven't checked out Embody, please be sure to do that. Look at adding that to your schedule for the 22-23 season. And they are worth checking out. They're just doing it different over there. And that's what it takes to make change in this industry. So check them out. Ashley, you know the drill. We like to start with the basics and build from there. So what are boundaries and why is it important that we set them?
Yeah, so really simply, boundaries are invisible lines that we set to separate ourselves from others to help us stay safe and comfortable and healthy. So, when we set our boundaries, they are a reflection and they honor our values and our needs and help us create safe and healthy relationships both with ourselves and with other people.
Yeah, so that's a
Mhm.
very concise, a very specific definition, and I love that because it's very easy to understand. So we agree. We talked a little bit before we started recording that this is not talked about enough. But when you hear sometimes healthy boundary, unhealthy boundary, what is the difference between the two, and what do we look for in a healthy boundary?
Yeah, so I'll tell you a little personal story about my experience with boundaries and my journey with from unhealthy boundaries to healthy boundaries.
Mhm.
So I started teaching dance in my early 20s. I think I was about 21. And at that time, I didn't know what boundaries were. I hadn't really learned much about them. And at that time I had very loose boundaries at work, and I, especially with my dance parents that I was
Oh my
working
gosh,
with.
me too.
Yes. Yeah, and
Right.
it just
Answering
they
the
were
phone at
not.
11 at night, like,
Yes, yes, that was exactly my experience. They had access to my cell phone number 24/7. I was getting calls at 10
yeah,
p.m. I was getting horrible emails at 10 p.m. Like, it was just, there was no separation between myself and my identity and myself as a studio director and a young educator. And so after a few years of that and realizing, like, this doesn't feel good, I don't like this, and also like no boundaries on like how I was treated, right? Like, parents could just like walk all over me or scream at me. And I didn't really know how to navigate that and how to set those boundaries. So after a few years of that and feeling really burned by a few parents, I then put up too rigid of boundaries. I put up big walls and I said, nope, nobody's accessing me. I'm not meeting with anybody. I'm not talking. Like, I'm going to teach dance and like
Two
stay away.
extremes. Yeah.
Yes. And so I went on both extremes. And I think, a lot of us, when we start this boundary journey, that's pretty common to go towards one extreme or the other. So healthy boundaries are somewhere in the middle. They are contextual. So they're going to differ from person to person and based on the context. And they're not about controlling the other person or somebody controlling you or telling the person what they're going to do. Instead, boundaries are what you are going to do in those situations. And they're really rooted in love and mutual respect.
Thank
Mhm.
you.
Yes, absolutely. And I love what you said. Going back to the first question, healthy boundaries with others and with yourself.
Yes.
With yourself. And I love the idea of, mutual love and respect for not only other people, but also for yourself, because I think we overlook the mutual love and respect for ourselves,
Yeah.
especially when we don't have boundaries with others. I mean, do you think that now I'm going off on a tangent? Here I go. Very soon up into the episode, I'm going off on a tangent. But do you think that like a lack is a very strong word, but a lack of like love and respect can be a symptom of or can cause lack of boundaries with others?
Yeah, absolutely. We know that people who are able to set healthy boundaries have greater self-esteem. Um, and so I think it goes both directions, right? I think healthy boundaries help us with our self-esteem, but also like if we are not loving and respecting ourselves, we're going to have those really loose boundaries and we're going to just do that people pleasing. We'll talk about that more later, probably,
Mhm.
but like just, doing things that are meeting other people's needs, but not meeting our own needs.
Mhm.
Do you think that wisdom and maturity has to do with it too? Because like I'm so interested in how do we teach kids to set those boundaries,
Mhm.
particularly in a structure where, they are taught to listen to the people that are in charge, the coaches, the
Right.
parents, the teachers, whatever. And those people are supposed to have their best interests at heart, right? But like how do
Mhm.
they communicate? But then also like going back to what we were saying, like I answered the phone at 11 and there were people looking at me going, "Don't do it. Don't give them your cell phone number.
Yep.
Don't pick up the phone." And I'm like, I am gonna change the world right now. Like I know what I'm doing, right? So it's like it's
Yep.
also I feel like a maturity thing too. Like you have to kind of learn the hard way sometimes that oh
Yeah.
shoot, they said that for a reason because they've been there, done that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think boundaries are definitely like you have to learn from them through your lived experiences. But I also do think, going back to what you were saying, I think we can teach and model boundaries from a very young age. Like, even with my daughter who's 5, we talk about boundaries all the time. Like, if she doesn't want a hug, she says, I don't want a hug right now. And she can say that to me, she can say that to whoever. And that is her right to have that autonomy over her body. And so I think even from that young age, and I think with what we're doing um through these conversations and what you are doing through these Beyond the Steps is like we're really trying to think about how we look at the dance culture differently, and that like there might be too much of a power and or there is too much of a power imbalance when it comes to the dance studios, of like the
Mhm.
teachers and the directors having all the power and the students not having any power or any autonomy. So I think part of modeling healthy boundaries with kids is helping them share that power and be able to have say and governance over their choices.
Mhm.
Yeah, thank
Mhm.
you.
So we're talking a lot about setting boundaries for yourself, and that's probably only one sided because once you set them, somebody has to follow them or somebody should follow them. You have to understand how to enforce those boundaries. So, what are some of the biggest things that we need to know or remember about respecting other people's boundaries?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing to remember is that everybody's boundaries are going to be different because they're based on our own values and needs. And so I think we have to drop the assumption that what is comfortable for you and what is okay for you is going to be comfortable and okay for other people. So
Mhm.
don't assume that they're going to be the same boundaries, even in close relationships. And that's why we need to communicate these boundaries and ask about other people's boundaries too. I think another thing to keep in mind is it can be really uncomfortable when somebody is communicating a boundary, right? And it can be easy to get defensive. So I encourage
Yeah.
people to really sit in that discomfort and be okay with feeling those uncomfortable feelings, and know that when they are communicating a boundary, that is a way that we can show them love and respect, right?
Mhm.
Because of respecting their boundaries builds trust and safety in a relationship. So we
Mhm.
can sit in our discomfort, we can recognize our feelings and be responsible for those without putting those onto them for sharing that boundary.
Mhm.
I want to touch on that because that is, and especially people in the older generations, this is
Mm-hmm.
really important because you mentioned with your daughter, if I don't want a hug
Mm-hmm.
right now, I'm not going to give a hug. Like, I'm going to give an example. Like, when I was growing up, like, you went around and said hello to every family member and gave a hug and a kiss and hello,
Mm-hmm.
hello. And, there were times that, there's times that my kids just don't want to do that. And like, if my parents were to see that, or somebody from that older generation were to see that, they would think immediately of, that's disrespectful. That's,
Disrespect.
they're
Yep.
not, they're not teaching that kid manners. But in
Mm-hmm.
reality, we're working with something that isn't familiar to that older generation, because it was very much an obligation, very much a sign of respect.
Yep.
How do you navigate that?
Yeah, so I think it depends on who the person is. So if it's somebody that's close to you that you have a close relationship with, so grandparents, family members, people like that, I would say have the conversation and say, hey, we're really working with, I'll use my daughter for example, we're really working with Eleanor on boundaries. This is what boundaries are, and this is how boundaries can help kids flourish and also help keep them safe. Setting boundaries helps people avoid and get out of toxic and abusive situations. So when
Mhm.
she knows that she has a voice and that she can say no to a hug or a touch with you, it's going to help her in other situations of people that she doesn't know quite as
Mhm.
well. So having those conversations and helping them understand that it's not about respect, it's just about like letting her have autonomy over what she does with her own body. And then if it's not somebody that you're close with, just let them have their opinion.
Let them have their moment. Yeah.
Yes, yes, you are not responsible. And that's another boundary. You're not responsible for their opinion about it. And, if it's somebody you're not going to see very regularly or somebody that's not a major part of your life, let them have it.
Mhm.
Yeah. Love that.
Absolutely.
Love
If you
that.
don't know them, let them go.
That's
Yep.
Uh,
right.
Absolutely. If you're just joining us, we are talking to Ashley Mowry about boundaries, how we set them, why it's important to set them, and the importance of setting them, and especially modeling for our students, performance athletes, each other. Setting boundaries. If you would like to catch the beginning of this episode, you can find it at Apollo Performance or at TP Dance Creations on YouTube and Facebook. If you have a comment, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop them in the comment section. We want to talk about what happens when you start to effectively set boundaries, because there's some clear benefits to it. And we know that if people know what the benefits are, they're more likely and motivated to actually take the steps toward it. So we're going to break it down. What are the physical benefits of setting boundaries?
Yeah, so I spoke to this a little bit already, but setting boundaries can keep us physically safe. So when we are able to set boundaries and communicate them, it can help us get out of or avoid toxic and
Mhm.
potentially abusive situations and people. Again, if we know that we have autonomy over ourselves and the right to say no, that can help us avoid those situations. The
Mhm.
other things that come to mind when I think about physical benefits is so we know that boundaries, setting boundaries and holding boundaries can reduce burnout and stress.
Okay.
And burnout and stress both have a lot of physical effects on us. And so
Mm.
when we can set boundaries, it helps reduce those physical effects. So physical effects such as high blood pressure, lower immune system, tense muscles, sleeping problems, headaches, low energy and fatigue.
Mhm.
All of those are physical symptoms of stress and burnout. And when we use boundaries, we can reduce those
Can
symptoms.
you give an example, Ashley, like, of one that would help reduce those physical symptoms? Like, what's a boundary, a common one that that you've experienced?
Yeah, I think, I think it's going to be person to person. And I think what comes to mind to me is, so when we're looking at reducing burnout, what are the areas where you are feeling burned out? What are the things or people in your life that are making you feel burned out? And we're at the end of today, I'm going to share that I more about a download that I have that everybody can complete to take this work a step further. And in that download, you're going to explore what are the situations where you feel energized and excited and safe and comfortable, and what are the situations and the times in your life and people in your life where you feel uncomfortable and drained and stressed, and where can you set boundaries there. So if I know that I'm constantly burning out because I have my email open at 10 p.m. and so therefore I'm not sleeping and I'm spiraling before sleep, that's going to affect my sleep. That's going to probably raise my blood pressure if I'm doing it over time, right? And so how can I set a boundary with my email and with my work or my dance parents or whoever it is, where I'm going to check it during these certain hours, and then before bed is a boundary of that's not going to happen. That's going to help me get more restful sleep. That's going to help me rest and unwind for the next day.
I would imagine the reason we're seeing this topic come up more now is because there's more people than ever working from home,
Yeah.
that hybrid home office, whatever. And it's really easy to blur those
Yeah.
boundary lines when you work from home. I can
Oh yeah. Yes, I
like,
feel that. And I think too, that's really like my experience from the studio has really helped inform like how I'm doing it differently now and what my boundaries are when I'm home and when I'm working. And I don't even like I don't have my email notifications on my phone, because I've learned, and that's been a more
oh my
recent
God.
boundary that I've set. Because I found that even like I mean, with what I do right now, I don't get a lot of stressful emails. But I was finding, even if I would get an email about like a deadline or like, remember this, or like, this is coming out, or a question, I would feel this urgency to respond, even though that urgency probably wasn't true. Like, I could wait till the next day to respond to that. So that's a new boundary that I've created for myself recently, to not even have the notifications on.
Okay, that's interesting.
Mhm. Do
Interesting.
not disturb. I have do not disturb set on my phone for hours every single day, to cut on at this time and cut off at that time.
Yeah.
The notifications do not come through. That has been a huge thing for me, because I can't put my phone on vibrate, or else I'll forget to look at it. So
Yep.
I always have the alarm on, the
Yeah.
the sound on. So all night long it'd be like ding, 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 ding,
Yep.
ding. Do not disturb takes all of that away. So I definitely endorse that. So let's talk about emotionally and mentally. When we set boundaries, what are some of the benefits that come along with that?
So burnout and stress also have emotional and mental symptoms too. And so things like depression, anxiety, worry, irritability come along with stress and burnout. So when we set boundaries, that can help reduce those things in our life. Research has also shown that setting boundaries and holding them can also increase our self esteem, as I said earlier. It can
Mhm,
also provide a greater sense of identity, better
mhm,
emotional regulation, more self awareness, right? Because we're aware of our needs and our values and how we need to get them met. It can improve communication, because we're having to say these things and have these conversations and let people know our needs. And it can also improve our relationships and have less feelings of resentment and anger in our relationships.
okay.
So, why do you think it's so hard for us to set boundaries? Like, is there a type of personality that tends to have a harder time setting boundaries than others?
Yeah, I think a few things come into play when it's hard to set boundaries. So I think number one is just a lack of clarity about our own values and needs. Sometimes we just don't even take the time or have the tools to be able to say, like, what are my needs in this situation? What are my values that I want to hold on to and um, that I feel stressed out when those are violated, right? So having clarity around your needs and values. And then also, as I spoke to earlier, the discomfort of communicating boundaries, I think holds a lot of people back, not knowing what to say and also being scared of the other person's reaction. And which again is a form of boundary, because if we're taking on a person's emotions and their reaction, that is also like not a great boundary within ourselves. And so those are the things that come to mind. And then when I think of personalities, I think of people pleasers, right?
Yeah.
People who are used to
Mhm.
putting others' needs ahead of their own, perfectionists who have that great fear of disappointing others. I think
Mhm.
of people who are codependent on other people for their emotional and psychological support. And then also a little bit what we were talking about earlier, as far as like our kids, I think when we are raised with a lack of autonomy, that can really affect our ability to set boundaries as adults. Because if we didn't know that we could say no, or that we could say, hey, I'm not cool with this, I don't feel good about this, or no, I can't do that for you right now, I have this on my plate, then that is going to affect us into adulthood and be really hard to set boundaries from there.
Do
Mhm.
you find that moms and educators have a harder time with it? Because I would imagine when you're working with children, right, whether they be your
Mhm.
own or someone else's, I would imagine, well, I know because I am guilty of this hardcore, but like it's really hard to draw that line in the sand with anything because
Mhm.
their needs are immediate. You know,
Yep.
they don't understand patience, they don't understand waiting, they don't understand, you know, they're what they need is most important in
Mhm.
that moment. So and sometimes it's just really hard to prioritize all of that and then protect your sanity. So do you find that that group of people struggles with it a little bit more?
Absolutely. I do. I hear it from moms all the time, educators. I think caregivers of any type really struggle with that because they are caring for somebody else. And so, like, how do I draw those lines and still take care of this person? So
Yeah.
it can be really hard, and it can be. Boundaries are not one of those things where you're going to just like set them and it's going to be perfect, right? Where this is like a constant work in progress, and we can start small, right? We can start on like, okay, what is a boundary that feels small enough that I can maintain it and do
Yeah.
it, and then add to those over time.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
Makes a lot of sense. So if you're just joining us, I am Bree Zabrowski here with my fabulous friend and co-host Melissa McDaniel Grisham. This is Beyond the Steps. This is the show we talk about all things affecting the performing arts community, from racism, gender inequity, sex abuse and prevention, nutrition, psychology, uh, science and medicine, all the things, right? And we have one guest expert join us today. We're talking to Ashley Mowry about boundaries. What are they? How do we set them? And how can they help us mentally and physically be stronger and healthier and avoid that all too dreadful burnout that we all go through at different points of our year, especially dancers, right? So, and the dance community in general. So, um, Ashley, I want to start by giving some examples of how we can set healthy boundaries for day to day environments. And I'm going to list them out and you give me a couple examples in each one. So let's talk about work. You know, people, we kind of highlighted earlier, there's a lot of people working from home, but there's a lot of people that will go to work every day and bring that work home with them and just can't let it go, right? And
Mhm.
it starts to wear them down. What are some examples of how we can set healthy boundaries at work with our boss, with our team, with ourselves?
Yeah. So I think in all of these situations, it's going to be so individualized. And that's why I really encourage everybody to do the free download that I am
Okay.
providing,
Mhm.
so that you can write out, what are the situations where you feel energized and excited and safe and comfortable? What are the situations and people where you feel unsafe, drained, stressed? Um, and you can look at those and see. So for work, what comes to mind for me, what we've talked about a little bit, is like boundaries with your communication with work. So whether that's email or texts, what are those boundaries that you need to set up? So if you are like in an office job, um, can you say like, I am working during these hours, and then when I go home, I'm not having email or text? um, and then how can you communicate that effectively with your boss or your coworkers or whoever it is that you need to? Other things that come to mind, and this is going to be kind of in all areas, but like how people treat you, how people speak to you, and it's okay to say like, hey, this situation feels like it's getting really heated, I'm going to step away for a few minutes so that we can regroup, and then once we're both calm, we can come back and work through this.
Mhm.
So knowing that you can handle situations in that way too, and that is a boundary, saying like, and it's different, right, than like don't scream at me, which is what you really want to say. But we can say it in a more effective way, just saying, like, hey, I'm going to remove myself from this situation for a few minutes until we regroup.
Mhm.
Those are the common ones that I hear for workplace.
What about for school? Let's talk about
Mhm.
kids for a second. What are the conversations we should be having with kids in relation to other children, or their educators, or a situation that they just may not be comfortable in, but really don't know how to articulate that? What are some ways that we can start encouraging them to set healthy boundaries?
Yeah, I think having these conversations with kids, saying, what makes you feel safe, and who do you feel safe around, and who do you feel comfortable around, who do you not feel safe around, what makes you feel uncomfortable, whether that's like physical boundaries. So, like if people are getting too close, or I see a lot of times with kids like roughhousing at recess,
Mhm.
and what are you comfortable with, what are you not, and then modeling to them how to say, hey, I'm going to go play over here for a little while, and realizing too that like that the other kids might have a response to that, but that's not their responsibility to take on that response and to take on those other people's
Great
emotions,
point.
which is really hard for kids, really hard for adults. But if we can start modeling that and knowing that they have an alternative to just like taking it and having to deal with it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Now, what about extracurricular activities? Because I struggle with
Mhm.
this one, right? Because we all have seen the kid that will take any opportunity to have an easy out, right? In the activity,
Mhm.
right? Like I figured out that I can say that this is my boundary, and that I'm physically exhausted or I'm tired, and I'm going to get to sit down,
Yep.
Yeah.
versus they find the gray areas and really really run with it.
Yep.
um, but I understand too, it's really important as adults that we identify that those boundaries are going to look different for every child, and we
Mhm.
have to respect them no matter how hard it is sometimes.
Mhm.
Like, I know I'm like this with my own kids. Like, I'll be like, get back out there. You know what I mean? Like, move, like, get out, and so how do you walk that line of like encouraging them and pushing them past what they thought they were capable of in a
Mhm.
good way, and that strengthens their character and their
Mhm.
overall ability, versus tormenting them and not doing something that's beneficial?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And a few things are coming to mind. So I think in the moment, if they have the language to set the boundaries and they're setting the boundaries, yes, we want to respect it. We want to validate that and trust them and trust that they know what's best for them in that moment. If we
Mhm.
see that it's a pattern, right? If we're a dance teacher and we say that there's this pattern every time, or if we're a parent and we see that like constantly they don't want to go to dance every night, whatever that is, or they're sitting out, I think that absolutely needs to be a conversation and saying, hey, I'm noticing that this is happening. Can we talk about what might be underneath that?
Mhm.
Right? Because I'm hearing that you're communicating that this is a boundary for you, but I'm wondering if there's some other stuff underneath that we can problem solve together. So, is it that you're too exhausted and that we just need to cut back on our number of activities? Is it that there's some fear or some fixed mindset stuff going on of like, you feel like you are not good at this part, so you just want to sit out, right? And helping them see what's underneath that, and then what you all can work on together to help them engage in whatever activity it is more regularly.
Mhm.
Okay. So I'm hearing peel back the layers and get to the root of the problem. Like, if you see
Yes.
a kid sitting down every day in tap class at, you know, 4:30,
No
and or they've got to run
problem.
to the bathroom at
Yep.
4:30, right? Like there's something else going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, even I would encourage people to, if possible, not have that conversation like right when it's happening, because there's probably a lot going on underneath the surface and they might not be able to like have that conversation and process what's going on. So it might be trying to catch it beforehand or like after the class is over, saying,
Mhm.
hey, I've noticed every tap class during this exercise, you're exhausted and you need to sit down, or whatever it is. Let's talk about it. Let's see what's underneath it and let's work together to help you move through this.
I don't know if it's a question or a comment, but we're about to find out. So I have had parents or families. Okay, let me start by saying this. everybody's boundary isn't for everyone. So
Mhm.
there's some dance programs, there's some extracurricular programs, there's some sports where particular boundaries won't work
Mhm.
if you want to participate in that. So, for
Yep.
example, I have families who are, which, their religious observances or their religious services are on weekdays. And they're like, our
Mhm.
boundary is that on Wednesday we go to whatever that is, or we go to a
Mhm.
Bible study, or we do whatever it is. And I totally respect that. Of course, that's your religious
Mhm.
observance, that's your spiritual practice. But that means that he or she cannot do jazz competitive class
Yep.
on Wednesday. That means they
Mhm.
can be in the teen company because they
Mhm.
meet for their jazz class on Wednesday night.
Mhm.
How do you handle, or how would you handle when people feel like they're being punished for their boundaries? It's like, what do you mean you can't be in the teen company? Well, it's on Wednesday night. So
Right.
I want you to go to your and have your spiritual practice, but also understand that your boundaries don't always align with the things that
Mhm.
you want to do.
Mhm.
How
Mhm.
would
Yeah, and
you
then, well,
navigate
that's a good point because then the parents are looking at Melissa like, you say you respect our boundaries, but then you went and put the thing on Wednesday night, right? So like, where's the happy medium there?
Yeah, I think there's a few things, a few ways to handle this. So number one, I think saying what you said, like saying like, "Hey, I totally respect your boundaries with this, and um, I respect your religious observations of this and practices of this. This is when this rehearsal is on the schedule, and if that changes in the future, we would love for your dancer to be a part of it. But right now, for this season, this is what works for everything, and this is, you know." Also explaining to the parents like the puzzle piece that is a studio schedule and
Mhm.
how it works, and how you have like all these pieces have to fit together. um, and then also what comes to mind is Jerry from Dance Education Equity Association. She always says, meet people where they are in service of the work. So meet people where they are, meet them where their boundary is, but also then your job as the educator is to service the work of that jazz dance, right? And so we're going to meet you where you are, saying, I respect you, I would love for you to be in this piece, but we have to prioritize the work of this whole entire group. And so if anything changes with your schedule, please let me know, and if in the future this rehearsal changes, we would love for you to be a part of it.
Mhm.
Okay, makes sense. Makes sense. And lastly, let's talk about family and friends, right? Do you leave it up to your kids to advocate, set their boundaries and declare their boundaries, or do you speak that for them?
Ooh, that's a really good question. And I think it depends on the age and the comfort level of the kid. And who they're comfortable setting those boundaries with. So I think, even my 5-year-old, we're working already on her communicating to people. And it starts with us within our immediate family of like, right, what are her boundaries? And then like as she gets older, hopefully, and we're also talking about like, how you say this to me, you can say this to friends at school. You can say this to Papa when we go visit, and encouraging that they can say those. And then but some kiddos, she's very verbal and she's, able to communicate those things. And so some kiddos, they might need you to model that for them and
Yeah.
say it for them for a few more years. But the hope is that by, I think, like preteen, teenage years, is that they have the tools and the skills
Mhm.
to be able to set these boundaries. And then one of the best things too that we can do though is, as educators, as parents, model these things like in our own lives, because they listen and they hear, right? And so if they hear us say to a family member our own boundary, they're going to clock that, oh, huh, that's so mom said that, she doesn't want to be treated like that to a family member, and they talked about it and they communicated about it. Huh, I can do that in the future too.
Mhm. Mhm. What do you say to particularly that preteen age, teenage, and adults for that matter? Because I have issues with this myself. A lot of times I've noticed that when you do set boundaries, particularly with family and friends, you lose your family and your friends, or those
Hmm.
relationships change in a way that you don't want, that isn't expected, or they change in a negative way, or they become distant. And I know that
Hmm.
teenagers probably in doing this, that's their biggest nightmare. Like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I will lose my best friend, or
Yeah.
I'll lose my
Hmm.
friends, or they won't want to talk to me. How do you navigate that, particularly with a preteen or a teenager?
Hmm. Hmm. A few things are coming to mind. So, one, I think talking about the fact that like healthy boundaries are communicated in a calm, respectful, loving way, right? So
Mhm.
I think sometimes when we think about boundaries, we think about just like these like explosive or just like really confrontational things.
Mhm.
And it doesn't, healthy boundaries aren't going to look like that. They're going to be conversations. And it can be as simple as, um, you know, I feel uncomfortable when we talk about this topic. Can we please change the subject? Right. And so teaching, like modeling that for the preteens, teens, and then also helping them understand that like yes their friends might have a reaction in that moment, and that's okay. People are allowed to have their own feelings,
Mhm.
and you don't have to take those on, and like it might make things weird and tense for a minute, but if this is a healthy relationship, is if it is a relationship that is, you know, productive and worthwhile having, then it is going to be able to be smoothed out and talked about and communicated with. And so
Mhm.
I think yes, they're those teens, their friendships are their whole world. And so normalizing that, like, yeah, this probably feels really scary. What's a way that you could do it that you feel like you can say your boundary, while also respecting them as a person?
Mhm. Absolutely. If you are just joining us, we are talking to Ashley Mowry about boundaries, how we set them, why it's important to set them, how we model them, all the things. It's been an amazing and helpful episode, and one that I know I needed even as an adult. So if you want to watch the whole episode, which you absolutely should, you can find them at TP Dance Creations or at Apollo Performance on YouTube and Facebook. Please share this far and wide. If people don't know it's there, they won't be able to learn from it. So please share with as many people as you possibly can. And if you have a comment, we love to know your thoughts. So drop them in the comment section so that we can see what you're thinking out there. I think that it's time for homework, Bree.
Yes, Ashley, I know you remember, but we do homework on this show. Um, and we like to give our guests or our listeners, I should say, something to work on and have tangible results from now until next week when they listen to us again and tune in. What is one thing you want to challenge everybody out there watching to do in those 7 days?
Yeah, so I have created a download worksheet, a free download worksheet that you can do to help you get clear on your values and your needs in order to set your boundaries. So I'll walk you through, it's 4 prompts. Talking again what we talked about earlier, who and what in your life feel safe and comfortable. How about energized and excited? Who and what in your life makes you feel unsafe, uncomfortable, drained, stressed? And then from there, what are some boundaries? And the last thing that I talk about on the worksheet is, okay, what is one boundary that you're going to commit to setting and communicating this week?
Mm,
I love that. So you have like a whole handout. That's great.
yes.
Um, I popped the link to this in the right here in the little ticker, and all you have to do, I believe, is enter your name and email address, and then the worksheet will appear
Yep.
in some way. So just make sure that you do that. This is an absolutely free resource, and we would encourage you to check this out and complete this exercise, not just with yourself, but with your family members as well. So share
Mhm.
it.
That's what I was going to ask, Ashley. Is this something that you need to do by yourself? Is this an introspective thing, or is this something that a dance educator might, or a coach, or a parent might
Great
guide
question.
a student?
Mhm. So I think definitely like first do it for yourself, and get a clear idea of your own needs and values and boundaries. And then absolutely, I think it would be so great if we got all the dance educators and parents out there doing this with their kids, and that I would let them. I would say, like, lightly guide them, let them have their own answers, but be there to answer questions if
Mhm.
they need to, or if they have any questions about what anything means or how to set these boundaries, but really letting the ideas and the responses come from their own brains.
Mhm.
Love that. And In addition to the homework that Ashley provided, we also want to encourage you to take our Steps Initiative course. This is a free online course series. Every single module has been created and curated by experts in their field. So we have everything from racism, gender inequity, sex abuse and prevention, nutrition, psychology, dance medicine, and science. And really, every module is meant to be a foundation and lay a foundation and give you resources to explore and educate yourself further in each of the topics. So, again, completely free. It's online. You can go at your own pace. Why not consider it professional development and just human development? But really check that out. It's our passion project. It's been done with love, and it was the catalyst for this entire series. So please share and take that yourself if you haven't done that already. And in case you need Ashley, I know she's always great about making herself available to people that need guidance and need help, and educators and parents and even children. She does consulting. Again, you can find her on the road with Embody Dance Conference. They're doing great things over there. So check out a city near you with that schedule. What's the website for Embody, Ashley?
EmbodyDanceConference.com.
Okay. So check that out and see when they're going to be near you. It's worth checking out. And congrats to Olivia Zimmerman on all the wonderful work that she's doing with that organization. It's fantastic. Ashley, how can people get in touch with you if they have questions on the worksheet or want to consult with you in any way? What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so my email address is ashley@ashleymowry.com. So please email me any questions if you want to chat about boundaries more, or you're interested in coaching or a workshop for your studio or team. I do one-on-one coaching with dancers from 8 and up. And that's all virtually on Zoom. So if you have a dancer, or if you're a parent watching this and you want to get your dancer into mindset coaching to help them build confidence and mental strength, check out my website, ashleymowry.com. And then I also do studio and team workshops, whether they're virtual or in person, about all different topics: confidence, mental strength, self-compassion, boundaries, performance anxiety, things like that. So check me out there. And then you can also find me on Instagram at ashley.mowry.mindset.
Awesome. You are so wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm back this season, and this is a blast talking about boundaries with y'all.
Love it.
It's always a pleasure to have you, Ashley, and we are so happy that we're going to have you back 2 more times to talk about 2 more topics this season. So please be on the lookout for our future episodes with Ashley. Thank you for watching today. Breathe. Thank you for being on this journey with me. It's been 3 amazing seasons, looking for many, many more to come. This is becoming a podcast, everyone. Beyond the Steps is going to be a podcast. Be on the lookout for that. Also, speaking of a series, Ashley's doing a series, but we're also finishing up a series with one of our other faves. Aisha Upchurch is doing part 3 of her guest series. That's our next show for 28-23. Be there at 3:30 p.m. on Friday to talk about building a program, a hip hop program, versus offering classes. What's the difference and why does it matter? As a reminder, share this episode. You can find the full episode at Apollo Performance at TP Dance Creations on YouTube. Please like, please share, and drop your comments. Get your homework done. You have a free download to do it. Until next time, we hope you continue your journey beyond the steps. See you next week.